You've heard Billie Eilish's song about it. You may have even read her. But what actually is this thing that's both the beginning and the end? Well, it's a paradox, of course. Specifically, it's the liar paradox. And it goes something like this. The liar is saying something that's not true. That's his first statement. And if it's not true, then he must be lying. So therefore, he's telling the truth when he says he's lying. But if he's lying, then everything he says must be false, including his claim to be lying. So therefore, he's actually not lying. And so he's telling the truth when he says he's lying. Again, this just seems to go around in circles without ever giving us a satisfying answer. In fact, that's one of the many ways in which this little thought experiment has been described, as a liar going around in circles. In the 19th century, George Boulis referred to it as a vicious circle. Another philosopher, A.J. Ayer, called it a self-contradictory statement. But in truth, it's more like a self-referential statement. The sentence that describes the liar refers to itself. This makes the liar paradox a foundational problem for any formal system that wants to include, for example, mathematical systems, logical systems, programming languages, and yes, natural language. Because we can use language to refer to itself, we can ask questions like, what is the meaning of life? Or what comes after the natural numbers? Or what is this thing that's both the beginning and the end? And get hopelessly lost in circularity. But there are ways out of this circularity. If you want to learn more about them, keep watching. One way to diffuse the liar paradox is to change your assumptions about the nature of truth. Here's a thought. If someone says something false, they might know that it's false. They might be deliberately lying, or they might be mistaken or misinformed. But no matter how all these different things can be, they don't change the fact that the statement itself is false. So if we take a step back from the liar paradox and say that something can be both a lie and the truth at the same time, then we can solve it pretty easily. In other words, we just change our assumptions about what it means for something to be a lie. Now, you might object that no one can be both lying and telling the truth at the same time. To that, I would say that no one can be both standing on a rock and falling off a cliff at the same time. But I can be both standing on a rock and not falling off a cliff at the same time. So it really depends on what you mean by those terms. But regardless, the point here is that there are multiple ways of looking at the liar paradox, and each way of looking at it gives you different options for getting out of it. Let me give you another example. Take the statement, all even numbers are divisible by 4. It's clearly false. But now imagine a superintelligent AI who doesn't know the meaning of the words even or divisible by 4. To the AI, the statement might appear to be true. Now some people will say that this is just a semantic issue, but it's not, because the meaning of words is determined by their use in language. And if you use the words even and divisible by 4 inches correctly, then the sentence is obviously false. But if an artificial intelligence has been trained on sufficiently large amounts of data to correctly interpret those words, then it might genuinely believe the sentence to be true. So we can look at the liar paradox as an issue of insufficient training data and solve it by throwing more data at it. Of course, these examples are fairly simple. The real power of the liar paradox comes when we try to apply it to mathematics and logic. In the early days of mathematical logic, it was widely believed that formal systems could capture the entirety of human knowledge. The idea was that all true statements could be formally proven, and all formally provable statements would turn out to be true. But Gödel's incompleteness theorems shattered that dream. Gödel showed that in any formal system complex enough to describe itself, there will always be true statements that cannot be formally proven. And there will always be formally provable statements that aren't true. And these statements can refer to things inside and outside the system, but they can also refer to the system itself. So we can use them to construct liar paradox. And that's why the liar paradox has been described as a vicious circle, a self-contradictory statement, and the thing that's both the beginning and the end. These descriptions all work because the liar paradox can trap you in a cycle of self-reference that leads nowhere. But maybe that's not such a bad thing, because if we encounter the liar paradox in mathematics, or logic, or computer science, it can alert us to the limits of our current methods and inspire us to come up with new ones. In other words, instead of thinking of the liar paradox as a problem, we can think of it as a feature that pushes us to understand our own methods better. So what's the solution to the liar paradox? Well, there isn't just one, because it really depends on what you want to do with it. There's no one right way to resolve the liar paradox, but there are many ways to do it, and none of them are particularly easy. Thanks for watching this episode, which was brought to you with the help of our patrons. If you'd like to help us make videos like these, you can get started at our support page.